Okay, so what I have here today is a stainless steel 20-ounce tumbler. What I like to do a lot of times with these is tape off the bottom part. I just use this blue painter's tape. Some people use electrical tape. This works perfectly fine for me, and you just kind of take it and you tape off the entire bottom portion where this line is here and the bottom of the tumbler itself. You don't have to do that. You can just keep it whole and paint the entire thing. That is completely up to you. Today we're going to be doing a few 20-ounce tumblers. I just have 70% alcohol here, and I take that, I put a little bit on just like a paper towel, and then I just take that, and I usually take the lid off of these first so that I can have my hand inside of it so I'm not getting fingerprints all over the cup as I'm wiping them off. So that's basically what you want to be doing. If there's any tape or stickiness left on them from the tag, you want to make sure that you're getting that off, and you want to make sure that you're getting all of your fingerprints off before you spray paint it. I will do that with both of my cups. Okay. Alright, so this is one of the cups that I had actually taped off the bottom, and we've painted this one. It does not have to be perfect. You can see that there's, I don't know if you can see this through the video or not, but you can see that it's not completely perfect. There are some spots where you can see through a little bit. We're just looking for a base coat on this. You want the paint to stick really well when we do this hydro dip. And you just need that base coat. Also, parts of your bottom layer are going to show through. The hydro dip isn't going to cover every ounce of your cup. So you just want to get that base layer in. What I've used here is a Rust-Oleum, and it's just a flat white. The only time I usually will use a flat is for a base coat because it dries really fast. If you try to use a flat for the actual hydro dip, a lot of times it dries just a little too fast, and then you end up with clumpy paint on your cup. So what I'm going to do with this one, I've picked out a few colors to dip this one, and I will show you that next. Okay, so you're going to have to forgive my bucket. I have used it for countless cups, and it's getting a little painted there. All of that paint is dry. You never want to hydro dip in a bucket that still has wet paint along the sides. So anytime if you're doing multiple cups, in a row, you definitely want to make sure that you've gotten any of that wet paint off of the sides, because you don't want that to affect your next cup. Alright, so what I've done here is I've taken the lid to my 20-ounce tumbler, and I've put it inside a plastic bag. Now when you do that, you want to make sure that you get as much of the air out as possible up top, and then kind of twist it around to make a tail on the other side. What you want to make sure, a lot of these plastic bags for safety purposes do have little holes in them, so that if they get on somebody's face, they don't suffocate. So make sure that you don't have any of the holes on here, or your paint's just going to leak into your lid. Okay, so then you take the tail of this and you pop it into your cup and fasten your lid down. And then you just want to make sure that none of this plastic is bubbling over onto your primed portion of cup. Okay, for this one I'm going to use Key Lime Gloss, Seaside Gloss, Satin Lagoon, and the magenta. Okay. Laying in my base coat really well. No, this isn't the right one. This one's needed. See, it was moving too much, that paint went off. Now when I'm spraying this in, I'm trying to spray it without moving the water so much that it's all going to stick to the sides. Because you want the majority of the paint to sit on top of your water, not float off to the sides, because then it won't be part of your design. And just when you think you might have enough paint on the top, add a little bit more. Okay. Alright, I think I'm good. And now I'm going to start with my arm twisted, lowering it, slowly twisting it in a spiral, and then underneath and pull it out. There we go. There's that saturation that I'm looking for. There we go. I'm going to take, I'm going to blow the excess water. Isn't that gorgeous? That looks beautiful. Okay, so what I'm going to be doing now is the second step. Basically, what you do with these, you'll notice that the tape is off and the lids are off. So after they start to get, they start to dry a little bit, you want to make sure that you take the lid off and you take the tape off, because you don't want the paint to stick to the tape. Then you'll be ripping paint off of your cup. So we did that once the paint started to kind of set, and now it's dry and we've brought it in. And now what we're going to do is we've actually got to re-tape this now, because we're going to put our epoxy on it to seal coat this, and we don't want the epoxy to go on the stainless steel portion. So I have this one that I made today. There's this one. This one that we made. And this one I actually had made a couple days ago. One really looks like a tie-dye. And then this one we had made today as well. So they all turned out really well. This here, I don't know if you can see it very well, but this here is actually a bottle that my daughter had wanted us to make. So this one we had to rig something up to this so that this would turn and we could epoxy this. But for right now I'm going to focus on these cups that we were doing. So basically I just take and I reapply this tape. I put it on so you can just barely see that stainless steel, so that it actually seals the bottom where the paint ends. And I'm putting that on here. Like this. Okay. Now when you're doing it for the dip, you actually have to get the whole bottom. But for this part, you don't, because your epoxy isn't going to go down that far. You just want to make sure that the epoxy doesn't end up on the sides, and it won't as long as you tape it. But you don't need to waste the tape and put it on the bottom at this point. So you're basically just going to tape all of them up. And Actually, I'm gonna move this one for a moment so that you can see this a little bit better. So I'm gonna take this and I just kind of pop it on here. And what I use these little medicine cups. You can get these on Amazon for like next to nothing. There's like a bunch in a pack for like $5 or something like that. And I use this 2-part epoxy. It's amazing clear cast epoxy. I do not have the box right now. I thought I still had kept the box, but I didn't. But it's a 2-part epoxy. You can get it anywhere, Michael's, Hobby Lobby, Amazon, wherever. I usually go to Michael's and use one of my 40% off coupons. It makes it a lot cheaper because this goes a long way. I've been using this same epoxy for a while now. Basically, I would say an entire cup of part A and an entire cup of part B would probably cover about 4 of these. So I mean, it really goes a long way. So what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to show you how I do one. And for one, I'm just going to put about a teaspoon of part A and a teaspoon of part B. You want equal parts. You want to get this as equal as you possibly can, because if you don't, it's never gonna settle correctly and you're gonna have mushy epoxy that's never gonna actually set up right. Okay, just a little bit more. Okay, so now when I'm using this little bit, when I'm using more and making for more cups at a time, I'll then mix it in like one of these small cups. But why waste one of those when I've got such a little bit? So I found that part B is actually easier to pour than part A. So I will pour part B into part A. Like that. And I just take these popsicle sticks. I got a giant box of popsicle sticks on Amazon for like nothing. I've been using them for months and it doesn't even look like any are gone. That's how many came in this box. It's huge. So I empty that into this one and now I just slowly mix these together. I don't know if you can see that, but I just slowly mix these together. You don't want to move your popsicle stick up and out of it too much because that's just going to create a bunch of air bubbles. You want to mix this together with as few air bubbles as possible. It's impossible to get rid of all of them or to not have any, but you want to mix it with as few as possible. You'll see it'll start to get cloudy, and then once it's really mixing together, it'll start to clear up. Now I'm going to move it up really quick and just kind of scrape the sides, but I try to do that without lifting it too much. Okay, this is just about all mixed together. Definitely some air bubbles in it, but you're definitely going to have that. So once you're sure that it's all mixed together, that's when you're going to start applying it. Now some people will turn their cup rotisserie on to do this. I actually don't. I move it manually as I go when I'm applying it, and then I turn the cup rotisserie on. My cup rotisserie moves a little bit faster than some though, so I prefer it that way. I think if mine moved a little bit slower, I might do it the other way. Okay. All right, so this is done and ready. And now I'm going to start by, I just start by lightly pouring some on. I stay away from the bottom and the top, and I just kind of put it in the middle so that I can use my brush to move it because I don't want it to really get too far over that line on either the top or the bottom. But I do want to make sure that it gets to the top and the bottom and that I don't end up with brush strokes that you can see. So I'm going to move this slightly. I'm going to put this one on here. And you can see flaws that you might have thought were on your cup are going to slowly disappear when you start to put this epoxy on it. It really makes a big difference, and it makes those colors really start to pop, and it really changes the cup completely. It's crazy how it works, but it does. Okay, I'm going to pour a little bit more on here. I try to get an even amount. You don't want it to be too gloppy, but at the same time you don't want to get so little on there that you can't, that you've got spots that aren't covered completely, because that's a pain to cover later. Okay. All right. So I've got this. Good, good. And now I'm just taking what's left and going over, and if there's any bit that didn't get covered, I'm covering that now. So there's a few spots that I feel like got a little less than others. I probably could have mixed up a little bit more epoxy, but this is just coat, you know, the first coat. So of course you want to make sure it's complete, but I also know that I can go over it a second time still too. Basically what you want to do is you coat it with the epoxy, and then if you want to put any kind of vinyl or any kind of words or names or pictures or anything like that on it, once that first coat of epoxy cures in about 24 to 48 hours, once that cures, then you put that vinyl on, and then you'll give it a second coat of epoxy. So I think we're pretty good on that one. And it just really pops now. You probably can't tell in the video as much how much that epoxy really changes the cup, but it really, really does. All right, and so then I would turn on, I'm gonna go ahead and turn it on, but I've still got some other cups to do. I'm just going to turn it on to kind of show you what it does, but I do intend to fill the entire rotisserie. And there you go. And so basically the movement keeps the epoxy from clumping and causing big drips. Before I had the rotisserie, I actually every 5 to 10 minutes had to hand rotate the cup myself. When you're using epoxy, it can cause rippling anyway, just because it's epoxy, and that's what it does. But when you're doing it by hand, you're more likely to get ripples. So this is a nicer way to usually get a much more smoother epoxy coat.